And right now I'm talking with author Karen Jessing, who wrote a book called Hey God, You Have a Plan, Right? And it's her memoir of living through and surviving domestic violence. And as we've been talking, one of the things that we've come up with, and she's seen so much of, and I know I've observed this as well, is that a lot of times pastors and other ministry leaders who hear these stories from women or from children, or folks that are caught up in this cycle that you talked about, this domestic violence cycle, they feel ill-equipped. They don't know what to do. They want to help.
Right.
They want to know what to do, but a lot of times they just, what do I do? So I want to give you an opportunity to speak to that, because I know that's a passion of yours, is to help equip these ministry leaders and pastors to know how to help somebody who comes to them. So what would you tell them?
In fact, Shelley, I was invited to go to Orange County to the Ministerial Association there, and they asked me questions, what can I do? I was also asked at Madera County Ministerial Association, the same thing they're saying, and the pastors are beginning to reach out and saying, we're faced with this, and we have not been trained as to how to deal with this. And basically the first thing is we need to know that the person is safe. Is it a safe place for them? And if it isn't, then they need to be directed immediately to victim services. Someplace, domestic violence hotlines or whatever, they are available for people to get in contact with so that they can get into a shelter someplace to be protected. The other thing is there are training programs now, and Focus Ministries Incorporated out of Elmhurst, Illinois, which has also been associated with the Moody Bible Church, has a fantastic program. And right now they have a webinar that they are training Christian leaders and Christian pastors as to how do you deal with a person who comes in. The first thing, you never ask a couple to come in together. You never say, okay, to the lady, Mary, would you please bring your husband and we'll talk about this together? Not a good idea. Not a great idea, because the woman will not say anything because of the fact that it will probably...
She'll pay for it in the parking lot.
She will, absolutely. And so it's wise to try to get the story to be understanding and to listen and to understand the fact that this is real.
And so we've got those numbers, and that I know that you gave them. We've got them in the prayer room as well, so make sure that if you need any help, or any kind of prayer support or anything like that, to call the prayer line. That's numbers on your screen there. But I also want to give you the number for the National Domestic Violence Hotline, and the prayer partners have this number as well. But just to make sure that you have it, very easy to remember, 1-800-799-SAFE. S-A-F-E, that's 1-800-799-7233, and that again is the National Domestic Violence Hotline. And then you talked about Focus Ministries Incorporated as well, that's doing a webinar, so people could probably look that up online and and get all that information there as well. So pastors don't have their hands tied behind their back. They are... They do have something that they can do. That's
correct. And I will also say that anyone who is in a domestic situation, a violent situation, may also contact the Focus Ministries, Inc., because they do have a program. Either teen violence is on the rise also, as well as husband and wives and spousal abuse. Boyfriend, girlfriend. So they do have programs for them, counseling. They have telephone lines available too for help.
My mom has used this illustration before, and I know it's not unique to her. I know she heard it somewhere else, but she's the one who taught it to me, and that was, that how do you boil a frog? You don't put it directly into the boiling hot water. You just raise the temperature over time. And I know that that's what I've seen happen in so many different lives for people who've been in abusive situations. It didn't just happen. It's like you said, you had this wonderful, courtship and engagement, and it wasn't until the week before that something happened with your first husband, and it just escalated over time, and it got worse and worse. And I think sometimes people begin to wonder, is this normal? Do other people go through this? And they begin to... you don't like it and you feel like it's wrong, but at the same time you're going, is this really as bad as I think it is? Do you find that?
Absolutely, and I experienced that myself, because basically at the end of 12 years I had to go in for counseling, and I was in counseling for 8 years because I didn't really know, I wasn't in touch with who I was, I didn't know who I was, and this was a whole new experience of getting the self-confidence, the self-esteem, and the self-worth back.
Yeah.
And that is the biggest loss that a person who has been a victim will experience. I also want to say, too, that teen violence is really on the uprise, too, and that one of the ways we have found that there is a control issue in teen dating is when a cell phone is given by the fella, and he says, here, I'm going to give you this cell phone, and we're finding that that is one of the biggest control issues, and it's a red flag.
Wow. So as parents, we need to be aware of that. And teenagers that are watching, you know, they do need to realize they have a voice, and they have value, and they have worth. And, you know, I'll be talking a little bit later just about understanding our identity and finding our identity in Christ. And we hear that so much, but in our culture that tells us that our identity is wrapped up in who loves us or who doesn't, or what we look like, or how well we can, you know, perform, or what kind of job we have, all of those externals. It's so easy to find our identity in someone else, and so many women are out there allowing a broken person to find their value and determine for them their worth when Christ has already placed his worth on them. He has already established their value by giving his own son for them. And, you know, one of the things I want to make sure, and I know you've said this, but I just want to make sure we reiterate this, is that nobody needs to stay in a situation like that.
Absolutely not.
That is not God's design for marriage. That is not God's will. And I know that you heard this from somebody who I believe was probably well-meaning, well-intentioned, but who said, there's probably something wrong with you. Go figure out what's wrong with you, and then that'll fix it. And that's not going to fix it. And we know that.
And I've been able to forgive this person.
Yeah.
He didn't understand.
Right.
He didn't know. He did the best he could, but it didn't help.
Right.
And the person who did finally tell me that I needed to get out of the relationship was a minister in Southern California. And he looked at me and said, God does not expect you to live like this.
Yeah. Well,
and that was the first time I had a little breath of fresh air.
Yeah. Well, and I was just going to say, I remember years ago, I was probably a teenager when I heard this, but I heard a pastor on the radio speaking on this issue. And he said, it doesn't mean you have to get a divorce to put him in jail.
That's right.
Sometimes, you know, because I know that a lot of times we do have such, and we need to have a very strong commitment to that covenant that we've made before God and before others. But it doesn't mean you have to live that way. And it definitely doesn't mean you need to subject your children to that, because that cycle just continues to repeat itself and things like that. So I can't believe our time is just about up. So I want to make sure before we go to the phones, and we're going to do that here in just a second, is I want to make sure that we give out Karen's website again. So I want to give you an opportunity to do that, and just tell them how they can get a copy of your book.
Okay. My website is www.KarenJessing, KarenJessing.com.
Okay, and so you can get the book, you can find these other resources that we've talked about, the National Domestic Violence Hotline, Focus Ministries Incorporated, all of those things that she talked about, and definitely get a copy of her book for you, for someone that you know is hurting and needs that encouragement to know that they do have value, they do have worth, they don't have to live like this, and God does have a good plan. And so thank you, Karen, so much for being here.
Thank you, Shelley.
I'm
I
so
appreciate it.
thankful for your testimony and for your willingness to share that with us.